When you're creating automations in Zapier, sometimes you actually only want the zaps to really run if certain additional criteria are being met, besides from just the trigger criteria that you set. And that can be done using the filter by Zapier feature. We touched on filters by Zapier earlier before when we created our more advanced Zap, where we actually posted the Facebook post that we created to Instagram as well, and where we used the filter step to filter out the instances where the Facebook post actually didn't contain an image, which would have led to an error in our Instagram post step, because we can't post an image or we can't post a post to Instagram without it containing an image. So if you've watched that video, you already know a bit of the basics of the filter step, but in this video, I want to go into all the details and want to show you all the different ways you can actually set up filters, because there are different ways and different kind of filter criteria that you can use, and some of them are more suited for some zaps and some of them are more suited for other ones. So let's dive right in and let me show you all you can do with the filters by Zapier. The first zap that we're going to take a look at is this one right here, which is a really simple one. And what it does, it gets new events from the Meetup platform. So that's a platform where you can search for events around you. So like meetups and conferences and so on, and just go to events. And what I set this zap up to do is to actually search the Meetup platform. So we're just going to go to the trigger to search the Meetup platform for new events that actually contain the text web development. So they are in the topic of tech, which is a topic that's specific to Meetup. And also we're going to be searching for events that are actually near the place where I live, which is in Berlin. And so we'll have a radius of like 10 kilometers or 10 miles in this case around my home to search for these events. So this would actually work fine, and we would get a lot of different events that are inside of the tech topic in Meetup and have the term web development inside of them. But the problem is that there are just too many of these events, and so I would even lose track of these events lit this way. So I want to have an additional step that filters out even more of the events if they don't contain additional criteria. And this is a great place to use a filter step. So we're just going to go out of this step right here, and we'll click on the filter step, which is the next one right here. So we're actually going to just go to the filter setup and testing. And in this case, I actually used the text that contains filter. So what I'm doing right here is I'm checking if either the name of the event or the description of the event. So just to show you, here is one of the events that is happening on the Meetup platform. And we have the title right here, and then there's always like this description that talks about what the event is about and so on. And this is what we actually are filtering for here. So first of all, the name, and then also the description. And in both cases, we're looking, does this contain the word JavaScript somewhere? Because we are only interested in events that also talk about JavaScript. So if that isn't met, so if neither this condition nor this condition is met, then this will be filtered out, and the event, like the zap, will not continue, and also the event will then not be sent to Discord, which is the next action step. What you can actually see here is that we have the option to have these different logical questions and logical operations here. So we could say we want the action to continue if it matches this certain condition and if it matches a second condition. And in our case, we said, we want it to match, to continue if it matches either this condition or the other condition. And we can do this by using these little and or plus buttons right here. So for example, we could say we want to add another and condition, and maybe we would say and we want the link to exist, maybe something like this. So it's just a weird example, but this is how we could actually make it so that the zap only continues if it either matches both of these criteria or it matches this one. And you can use this to build more complex and advanced kind of logical like operations, and you could say have more complex decision making inside of your Zap by using these different criteria, and only having the Zap continue if it really exactly matches whatever you are wanting to match and whatever you want it to be. And that's one of the most important and most valuable and most powerful features that the Filters by Zapier app actually has. Now, there's also a lot more to uncover here, because now we've only talked about these two different like filter conditions, but there's also a lot more filter conditions that we can go through. So you see this whole list right here that has all the different conditions that can be met and that we can use to create more advanced filters as well. We'll start by going through the different text filtering options or text conditions. So we saw the text contains here already, and this just means that the text, so JavaScript, just has to be somewhere within the name to make this statement or this condition true, and to make the Zap actually continue. But there are also different other text properties or text filter conditions. Obvious one is just the does not contain. So this is just the opposite of the contains option, and it would just mean that we would actually filter out all of the JavaScript events. So it would only be the ones that don't contain JavaScript somewhere. And we have this kind of like the one version and then the opposite version for all of these. So it's always contains, does not contain, exactly matches, does not exactly match, and so on. So it's the same for most of the different conditions that you have here, so that you always can go in both directions. Next up, we have the exact matches or the exact match options. And this is a bit different, because this means that if we choose this, well, it means that the name has to be exactly whatever I put in here. So in this case, the name of the event would have to be JavaScript exactly. It couldn't be JavaScript 1, for example, or like, if the name was JavaScript 1, then it wouldn't work. If the name was JavaScript tutorial, then it also wouldn't work. And even if the name was JavaScript, but with a capital J at the beginning, well, then it still wouldn't be an exact match, and this would still not be true. So if you use the exact match, it has to be exactly the same as whatever you put in here. And again, there's also the opposite. So for all the cases where it doesn't exactly match, you can use the does not exactly match option. The next filtering condition is the is in condition, and we'll choose that right now, like this. The text is in. What this does is it checks this value right here, and then it compares that to the value right here. But in this case, you could have multiple values in here. So you could say JavaScript, comma, maybe Python, CSS, HTML, and so on. So you could have like a list of different items to choose from. And if the name of the value right here is one of these values, it doesn't have to be one, it doesn't have to be like the second one, it could be any of these values, then this is true. So you can use this to check your value, your field, against a list of values that you previously defined, and see if it matches one of them, and see if it's one of these conditions or one of these one of these categories. So in this case, this would mean that any event that is named JavaScript, Python, CSS, or HTML, one of these four will be, for these, the filter will continue, and the Zap then will send this event to my Discord channel. Next, we have the exists filter condition, and this allows us to filter out runs of our Zap where a certain condition or a certain piece of data exists, or where it doesn't exist. To demonstrate this, I have set up this new example. In this case, the trigger is when we have a new labeled email. So if we have a new email that has the label invoice inside of my Gmail inbox, and then we want to actually upload that invoice to a specific folder in my Google Drive. The thing is that sometimes the invoice isn't sent as a file instead of the email, so we would get a lot of errors if we didn't check for this attachment. And so we have this filter step that actually, if we click on this, that actually checks if the attachments actually exist. So if there is an attachment, and if there isn't, then well, the Zap just stops and nothing gets uploaded to Google Drive. But if the attachment exists, well, then we can actually continue and we can upload that to our Google Drive account in the next step. Another filter condition that we can use is the greater than or less than filter condition. And what it pretty much does, it just compares a numeric value that you get to a numeric value that you specify. And it just checks if it's bigger or smaller. And then if it's bigger or smaller, depending on what you choose, this will then be like the filter condition that has to be met for the Zap to actually continue. So in our example where we want to pull in the events from Meetup, and send them to our Discord channel, this obviously wouldn't make any sense because we do need a numeric value to make this work. So one thing we could do actually is just use a different filter, and I don't know if that will make much sense, but let's just check what other options we have right here. So there's one numeric value, which is the RSVP count. So we could say maybe this should be more than 10. And if it's not more than 10, then we don't want to go to the event. So we'll just do that for now. So we'll click the RSVP count, and then we'll go down and we'll go to the option. Where is it? Here, right. So we want the this option to be greater than, and then our value, which is going to be 10. And so this only will work if this is greater than 10, which right now it isn't. So if we click on continue, we should see that this Zap wouldn't have continued. And just as expected, we now see that your Zap would not have continued because, again, the RSVP count was 4, but we said it has to be bigger than 10 for us to want to go to that event. And so the Zap was stopped by the filter. The last option we have is to use date or time-based kind of criteria. And we can use this, for example, to say that we only want to go to events, in our events example, that start maybe like after 6 p.m. So this could be useful, for example, if you are just working, have a normal day job, but you do want to go to these events. Maybe you want to filter out the events that are like at 10 a.m. in the morning, and you only want the events to appear in your Discord when they are in a time where you actually might be able to go to the event. So we could say something like the date time is greater than 6 p.m. and use that. So we could say date time after, and then we'll choose, instead of the local date, we'll choose the local time. And then we'll say it should be after 6 p.m. like this, and then click on continue. And again, we see the Zap would not have continued. And this is because if you look at the local time down here, we see the local time is at 1 p.m. So obviously that's not after 6 p.m. And therefore this event doesn't fall into the time frame that we want our events to be in. So that's it already for the filters by Zapier. Now there are a couple of more filter conditions that you can look through, but the most important ones are the ones that we covered in this video. And so you should be able to use the proper filter based on what we've did in this video in 95% of the cases. So I hope that this video was helpful to you, and I'll see you in the next video.